Hi, Adam here, Brain-Based Dad. If you're unsure about unschooling, or if you're worried that your kids won't learn if you try unschooling, you can relax. You will be an unschooler. It's inevitable, and I'm going to tell you why. A lot of homeschoolers are worried about unschooling. They get concerned that if they're not following a curriculum, their kids won't learn. But what you probably don't realise is that for most of your life, you've been an unschooler. And eventually, your kids will be unschoolers too. If you get value out of this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed, I'd really appreciate it if you did that too. See, before you went to school, you were an unschooler. You were a baby and a toddler. You learned to walk, you learned to talk, you learned a whole language all by yourself with no lessons at all. You observed, you imitated, you mimicked, and you learned. And then at 5, you went to school and you started following a curriculum and having lessons, most of which you've forgotten by now. You see, the problem with following a curriculum is that you don't really learn stuff. Most of what you learn gets forgotten. Schools follow curricula because it's easy for the teachers to teach. You regurgitate information that's disconnected from the real world and has no relevance to the rest of your life. It isn't salient for you. You follow it because it's in a workbook and that's it. Sure, you try and make it relevant, you give real life examples, but they're not real life. They're made up in a workbook. Your brain recognizes when you're out in the real world. When you're going to a shop and having to count money, that's different to reading a workbook and pretending you have money. Or theoretically saying you have £5 and you spend £3.56, how much change do you have? The brain recognizes the difference when you're holding it physically in your hand and you're counting the coins and you're handing something to someone and they hand you change back and then you work it out. That has relevance. That's salient to what you're learning. When you follow a curricula, you come up with hypothetical examples that are trying to emulate the real world, but they are not the real world. When you follow a curriculum, you're learning things just in case. So you learn algebra just in case you need algebra later on. But then after about 15 years or so of learning things just in case, you left school and you went out into the real world. And then maybe you got a job and you had to learn a computer program for your work. So you learned how to use that computer program. Maybe you took on organizing an event and you had to learn about doing event planning and management. Maybe you ran your own business and you had to learn about marketing and sales. You learn it at the moment that it's important and relevant. It's called just-in-time learning. Just-in-time learning is learning something at the moment at which you need it. When you learn something just in time, it's because it's relevant and important to what you want to accomplish right now. And when you learn something that way, it's easier for your brain to remember it because it's more salient. It gets wired in much more strongly. So you could say that unschooling is all about just-in-time learning, not just-in-case learning. So when you left school, you became an unschooler. It took you leaving school to become an unschooler, but you became an unschooler and your kids will too. You'll either follow a curriculum and learn things just in case, or you'll let them lead their own learning and learn things just in time, at the point at which they're important and relevant to them, and let them get wired in much more strongly. But I know that that can be scary, so if you want to know more about unschooling, you should definitely watch this video next. If you got value out of this, please give the video a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe too.